Previously on John Wick. Chapter 1, Russian mobsters steal retired assassin John Wick's car and kill his puppy, a gift from his recently deceased wife Helen to help him grieve her death unalone. John wants revenge, so he re-enters his old life starting at the Continental, a safe house for assassins, with Winston, the manager, and Sharon, the concierge. He eventually kills much of the Russian mob in New York and finds a new dog and walks away again. Chapter 2 sees John pulled back into his old life by an Italian crime boss named Santino, who holds a marker on John that requires him to do what he wants. What Santino wants is for John to kill his sister, so he can take her seat on the all-powerful high table. Before John can kill her, she takes her own life, but John is ultimately responsible. Santino and the High Table put out a contract on John's life, and after killing scores of would-be assassins trying to kill him, John chases Santino into the New York Continental where he kills Santino, breaking the rules of not doing business on Continental grounds, and he's excommunicado and has an international bounty placed on his head for $12 million. Chapter 3 begins with John handing in his ticket to his former crime family, the Ruskaroma, for safe passage out of the city of New York. John is in a fight for his life from Casablanca to New York, and assassins from all over the world unsuccessfully attempt to collect the bounty on his head. Winston shoots John off the side of the Continental in an attempt to save his hotel and his place in their world. John swept up and rescued by the Bowery King, who together decide to attack the High Table directly as revenge. And there you have it, you're ready for Chapter 4. If you've been following my channel since the beginning, about 2 months ago now, you've likely heard me bitch and moan about my dislike for sequels and reboots, etc. And yeah, I generally hate them and find them to be one of the main problems with modern entertainment and why we have so few new, exciting properties. So you might be thinking, baby, then why review John Wick Chapter 4? Well, the short answer is that it's exactly what I've been asking for. Well, yeah, it's a sequel to a new franchise, and the first movie was released less than 10 years ago. I'd say if there's an exception to my rule, this is definitely it. By the way, this is gonna be a spoiler-free review, so don't worry. You definitely want to go into this one without too much being given away. That said, my earlier recap aside, I have to assume you've seen the first 3 movies. Hell, even I went back and watched all 3 prior to rolling out and catching Chapter 4. Partly to refresh my memories of the specifics, but partly because they're just fantastic action flicks and just a blast. This go round I got my teenage son to watch them with me and got him to go with me to the theater for Chapter 4. Despite that, do you believe he still won't hit the goddamn like button on this video because of his integrity or something? I hope he can eat his damn integrity. It's a bunch of bullshit if you ask me. He won't even click a stupid like button for his dad. I think it's horseshit. Anyway, the basic premise is simple. When last we saw John Wick, he had been shot off the side of the New York Continental Hotel by Winston, who had just been granted a second chance by the adjudicator sent by the High Table. Good news, she's nowhere to be seen, so if you disliked her character in Chapter 3, you're in luck. John obviously survived the fall and was rescued by the Bowery King at the end of Chapter 3. A few weeks seem to have gone by when Chapter 4 begins. John is healed up and he's training under the protection of the Bowery King. His goal is clear: go directly at the High Table and kill them all. After an eventful trip to Jordan, John heads back to New York and meets with Winston, who's had some eventful days of his own, who tries to convince him that it's just impossible to kill everyone, even for him. The table simply replaces pieces. He explains that to win his freedom, he needs to challenge the Marquis, played by Bill Skarsgård, to a duel under the ancient rules, and John goes about the business of earning back his ability to do just that by hopping across the globe from Osaka to Berlin and eventually Paris. The movie culminates at the foot of the Sacré-Cœur. I think now that we're at the end of Chapter 4, it's time to be honest. The John Wick movies are a collection of some of the greatest action movies ever put on film. They've sort of snuck up on us over the course of the last decade. At least they snuck up on me. To think it all started with a little movie about the assassin who left the life only to be pulled back in after some gangsters kill the puppy given to him by his recently deceased wife and steal his prized 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1. Such a small, concise premise that was almost laughable in its simplicity. From there, we've watched the world he's been written into unfold into a wildly rich universe over the course of the following 3 movies, and it's been a fun ride. Returning characters are all solid as usual. There's Keanu Reeves playing, well, the Keanu Reeves character he's played successfully most of his career. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. Not everyone has to be Daniel Day-Lewis. Keanu Reeves is a charismatic, likable star that's evolved over time into a first-rate action hero thanks to the Matrix movies and now John Wick. Add to it, from all accounts, he's easily one of the nicest people in the industry, so it makes perfect sense he's had such a great career. He's good at what he does, and people love working and being around the guy. Good on you, mate. Ian McShane as Winston is great as usual, as is Lawrence Fishburne as the Bowery King. Lance Reddick, who tragically died a few weeks ago, is also back as the concierge Sharon of the New York Continental, and is fantastic in his last role. Newcomers this time around are Bill Skarsgård as the Marquis, martial arts legend Donnie Yen as Kane, Shamir Anderson as the Tracker, and each are well-rounded and compelling characters that never really feel shoehorned in. Each feels as if they had existed within the universe before we ever got to them, and that's why the John Wick universe really feels so real. Like always, Chapter 4 takes us around the world to actual locations, and the visuals show. It's hard to overstate how refreshing it is to see a movie set on location, rather than the shitfest we've all gotten used to from Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars, spewing CGI at us with every frame in their more recent outings, even when they're clearly not needed. The individual set pieces and design are beautiful, which has been a staple of the franchise since the first movie. I will say that a couple of the fights set in Osaka were reminiscent of the mirrored and glass rooms near the end of the third movie, but they were still just so well executed. And of course the fight scenes, just wow. I can't imagine the choreography and coordination it takes to pull these off. In Chapter 4, you've got huge fight scenes in Osaka, in Berlin, and multiple ones in Paris. If you step back and accept it for what it is and suspend disbelief, it is so easy to get lost in the sheer joy of these things. In a world that is increasingly becoming more and more watered down and more nerfed of anything that might offend the sensitivities of some whiny pussy on Twitter, John Wick is full-on firearm porn. The production team have managed to ramp up this level of action with each movie, which, when you think back to the scene in the Red Circle Club from the first movie, it's kind of hard to imagine, but it's true. The final 30 minutes or so of Chapter 4 are so action-packed and frantic, they're almost exhausting to watch. Now, just so I can say I picked a few nits, I'll say that as much as I like Bill Skarsgård as an actor, I'm not really understanding his casting here. He's playing a Frenchman, and his accent, at least to me, was so off that I honestly had no idea he was supposed to be French until Winston mentioned it halfway into the movie. With an international cast, it seems like it would have been fairly easy to find a legit French actor to play the role, or at least allow Skarsgård to play a similar character but using his own voice. That said, the character of the Marquis is compelling, and Skarsgård is great in it. I also wasn't a fan of Scott Adkins playing the German character Killa. They had that poor guy in a huge fat suit, which was so obvious. And of all the main villains that have been featured in the 4 movies, he was the only one I can remember that seemed like a legit cartoon character. This is really too bad, because the scene featuring the 4 of them at the table playing poker was fantastically shot, and could have been much different had they not made him so campy. I don't think it was his fault, it's just a weak character in an otherwise outstanding movie. As I said at the top of the review, I'm tired of perpetual stories that have no ending and assume all stories have an unlimited universe that can be spun off. We've gotten 4 truly remarkable movies out of this franchise, and if they allow it to stay here, it will be a legendary series that will hold up for a long time. They leave the movie in a place that would make for a beautiful and natural conclusion. But that said, it also felt like there was an attempt to spend a little less time focused solely on John in this one, and there were at least 2 characters that felt like potential spin-offs. Both characters were fun additions, but I don't really care about anyone other than John. I'm sorry. Put me down as a hard no for that. I love that the Wickiverse was fleshed out enough to feel real as John moved within it, but I have no interest in having it continue to expand or in following the exploits of others in it. I don't need a series about the various Continentals around the world, or a prequel with John before he met Helen, or one about how the High Table was formed, or anything like that. The mystery of it all is what's appealing. For once, Hollywood, please stop while you're ahead. Oh, and finally, there is a post-credit scene, so you'll want to stick around and wait for that. So, do I recommend John Wick Chapter 4? Yeah. What a fantastically fun movie and a great way to, hopefully, wrap up the John Wick saga. This is one you're gonna want to see as soon as possible before some asshat spoils it all for you. Then you're probably gonna want to see it again. Or don't. I'm not the Baba Yaga.